A young British girl suddenly disappears whilst working as a hostess in Tokyo.
To anyone who knew Lucie, were completely out of character. She was the kind of girl who kept in very close touch with her family back home.
Her father is in despair and angry at the official Japanese response.
It was just incredibly slow and frustrating. We were just sitting there thinking, where is Lucie? Where is Lucie?
But a determined fight for justice from her family transforms a local missing person case into a global story.
We'll do everything we can. We're working closely with Japanese authorities here.
Sparking the biggest criminal hunt in Japanese history, the investigation uncovers the horrific and deadly fantasies of a millionaire playboy.
He is indeed a very dangerous person. Sexually very dangerous.
This is how the man referred to as a beast with a human face was finally brought to justice. Tokyo is one of the most dynamic and modern capitals in the world. It's a magnet for tourists and an exotic stop-off for young travellers. Every year, thousands of women from all over the world are drawn to the easy money on offer working as hostesses in Tokyo's nightclubs. Richard Lloyd Parry is a journalist working in Tokyo who covers the case from the start.
The word hostess in London or New York would suggest something really rather seedy, not all that far from a prostitute. In Japan, that's not the case. These bars are places where men go after work to have a drink and just to talk to the girls.
Leah Jacobson, an American expat living in Tokyo, worked as a hostess for over 2 years.
Our job there is to make the men feel special, to boost their egos. There are hostesses there who will fill your drinks, and they'll light your cigarettes, and they'll pamper you. They'll treat you like a movie star.
But for many Japanese men, one specific characteristic is valued more highly than conversation or the company of young women.
There's definitely a lot of men who have a specific fetish for girls who have blonde hair and blue eyes, and there are clubs that cater to that fetish specifically.
On the 4th of May 2000, Lucie Blackman, a 21-year-old former air stewardess, arrives in Tokyo with her friend Louise Phillips. They've come to make some money, and more importantly, to experience the vibrant cultural life in Japan. Lucie's father Tim recalls his daughter's decision to head to the Far East.
She had been working as an air hostess with British Airways with her friend Louise, and they both decided they were going to do this exciting piece of travelling. So they both jacked in their jobs with British Airways and made these travel plans.
After a few weeks in the city, Lucie and Louise find hostess work in the Casablanca Club in Tokyo's Roppongi district. But unbeknownst to Lucie and Louise, there can lurk unseen dangers in these dimly lit and sleazy bars. Akio Kuroki served in the Tokyo Metropolitan Police for 23 years before becoming a crime reporter. He knows the Roppongi district well.
I think pleasure district is the best way to describe the area. There are a lot of very high-grade bars employing equally high-level hostesses. Sometimes the bars would make you get involved in criminal activities such as prostitution, selling drugs, or in some cases making connections with gangsters. For the ordinary Japanese, Roppongi is a very dangerous district.
In this twilight world of Roppongi clubs, young foreign girls must go on organized dates or dohans with clients who take a liking to a particular hostess. These men pay the club a hefty fee to take a girl out for dinner, but they must return them to the club after the date is over.
It's a paid date, and they take you to a nice restaurant, they show you off around town, you get to pretend like it's a real relationship even though everybody who sees you knows that it is absolutely a dohan.
She would explain about these things on the phone and say, well, if I can get this dohan, I'll say, well, what's that? Oh, well, you meet the chap and you go and have dinner and then you bring him back to the club and you get paid a lot of money for that. And I thought, well, if that's what you're doing, try and do it.
On July the 1st, 2000, Lucie Blackman fails to return to her apartment after going on her very first dohan with a client from the Casablanca. The next morning, her friend and roommate Louise Phillips receives a disturbing phone call from a man claiming to know where Lucie is. Worried and upset, she immediately calls Lucie's mother in the UK.
Hi Jane, it's Louise. Look, I'm a bit worried. Lucie, she didn't come back last night, and I've just had this guy on the phone who says that Lucie's joined a cult.
For Lucie's father, it's distressing news, and alarm bells are immediately ringing.
I couldn't believe that Lucie would have voluntarily opted to go into a religious cult, because that was not her kind of lifestyle.
The family are desperate for any details surrounding Lucie's disappearance, but the time difference is making the exchange of information difficult. Less than 24 hours after her sister has disappeared, Sophie Blackman takes decisive action.
Sophie said, well, I'm going to get on a plane and go out there. And I said, well, I can do an awful lot more at home here on the telephone for 3 or 4 days, talking to as many people as I can and trying to find out about it.
Fears for Lucie's safety are growing with every passing hour. Now in Tokyo, Sister Sophie is in touch with the British Embassy and the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. But after 2 days in the city, she's left bewildered by the response to her sister's disappearance. Despondent and frustrated, she phones their father Tim in the UK.
Sophie had been ringing me up saying, I'm getting absolutely nowhere with this, Dad. They're not interested because Lucie was a foreign national. I'm only a girl. There's a terrible sort of blight against women out here as a woman's viewed very much as a second-rate citizen, and they're not even registering Lucie as a missing person at the moment.
Tim realizes he needs to act instantly. With little idea where to begin the search for his daughter Lucie, he gets on the next plane to Tokyo. A young British girl working as a hostess in Tokyo has gone missing in suspicious circumstances. 21-year-old Lucie Blackman, an ex-air stewardess from Sevenoaks in Kent, has been missing for a week. Her father, Tim Blackman, is distraught and has flown halfway around the world to begin the desperate search for his daughter.
I was suffering from shock. Somebody would tell me something and I would forget it instantly and I wouldn't remember who the person was. I was in a really poor mental state.
On arrival, Tim knows time is of the essence, but he's immediately frustrated and bewildered by the police response to Lucie's disappearance.
They say, well, she's an adult, she's only been gone, 2 or 3 days, she's just gone off on a bender somewhere, so we're not going to waste our time on that.
But what is most alarming is Lucie's abrupt lack of communication.
To anyone who knew Lucie, were completely out of character. She was the kind of girl who kept in very close touch with her friend Louise, with her family back home.
Hi Sophie? Sophie, it's me, it's Lucie.
She was always calling,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
even if she didn't have anything very much to say.
The food is...
Persuading the Tokyo police that their concerns are well-founded is a hurdle Tim and Sophie must try to overcome.
Sophie and I would go to the police station. We would sit in a little grey interview room about 10 foot by 8 foot, and nothing seemed to happen. It was just incredibly slow and frustrating, and every time we were there, we were just sitting there thinking, where is Lucie? Where is Lucie?
"12 days after Lucie goes missing, and with the Tokyo police offering so little help, Tim decides he must launch his own investigation. With the help of Lucie's friend Louise, a picture emerges of Lucie's last known movements. The day she disappeared, she went on a dohan, or paid date, with a customer from the Casablanca Club.
Okay, nice out. Bye.
It was a Saturday morning. Lucie left the house which she shared with Louise to go off and meet a man, a customer from the club, for a date, and he was going to give her a mobile phone, which was very valuable. She didn't have one.
At about 5 p.m, Lucie calls her flatmate Louise in Tokyo.
Hello? Hey, Luke, me. Okay, Liz. You right? Yeah, you? Everything's fine, it's really great. Actually, I was going to tell you, he's going to buy me a new phone, which is great.
She called a few hours later, sounding bubbly, saying this chap had given her a bottle of champagne, which she was going to share with Louise.
At 7 p.m, Louise gets another call.
Hey, I'm at his place now. Right. Well, what time are you coming back? What time is it now? 7. I'm going to leave in about half an hour. Right, okay. Thank you.
This was all the information we had, that Lucie had gone on a trip to the coast with somebody in the afternoon and hadn't come back. We knew it was serious because she would always want to come back. She'd got arrangements with Louise for that evening, which she broke, and that's not like Lucie to do that.
Tim goes back once again to the Tokyo police. He knows that a trace of the phone she used to call Louise could lead them straight to Lucie.
The Tokyo Metropolitan Police were telling us quite categorically that it was against Japanese law to investigate telephone conversations because it was against the privacy laws.
The family are hugely frustrated. Yet again, Tim must move the investigation forward without the full assistance of the police. He decides to turn to the media to increase the public profile of the case. He organises a press conference.
The thought that she may have suddenly become interested in a religious cult over a Saturday afternoon is very unlikely.
Kentaro Katayama is a Tokyo journalist and television presenter following the case.
The family were very helpful to the case at the time. When you watch on television, and you basically every single day we saw them on the streets giving flyers and asking for information.
Tim's use of the media is paying off. The case has gained huge public interest. But despite the increased profile, the investigation remains slow and ineffective. Undaunted by police indifference, Tim spots an opportunity to further highlight his desperate search for his missing daughter.
When we knew that Tony Blair was coming to Japan, we met and were filmed, and he also spoke to the Japanese Prime Minister about the case. So at that point it had really reached the zenith of coverage and importance.
We'll do everything we can. We're working closely with the Japanese authorities here. The police came under a lot of pressure, largely because of the efforts of Tim Blackman and the way that he brought political pressure to bear on the Japanese government.
The massive media coverage and the intervention of the British Prime Minister are turning the investigation into one of the biggest missing persons cases in Japanese history. But still, no new information emerges.
The Japanese local businessmen running these bars and clubs, they didn't really want to get involved with the police, and there were a lot of expat young women working there who we knew the last place they would go if they had any information was to the police.
If you go to the police, the first thing the police do when you go to a police box is they ask for your papers. They ask for your alien registration card. So they would be afraid of getting deported.
Tim realizes he must employ new tactics if he is to trace Lucie.
By setting up a hotline, we hoped that it would bring the information to us that wouldn't otherwise have come out.
They receive over 100 calls almost immediately. Several of the calls are from girls who worked in Roppongi hostess clubs.
We'd had a number of phone calls, and I found myself with girls who were telling me about experiences they'd had, where they'd gone off with this chap in a very fast car, and he'd been taken to the coast, and then they'd gone to a condominium, were having dinner or drinking a very special wine.
Time after time, these women described sipping this drink and almost immediately falling into unconsciousness.
They'd woken up the next day and felt absolutely terrible. I can remember in the night seeing a little red camera light, and had gone back to Tokyo and been violently ill for a number of days.
Many of the girls also describe the man accompanying them on their dohan as a very wealthy, well-dressed Japanese man in his late 40s. Police intensify their investigations around the Roppongi clubs and reopen any criminal reports involving the rape or abuse of hostesses. Lucie's mother, Jane Steer, approaches Di Davis, a retired officer in the British Metropolitan Police, to join the hunt for her daughter.
So the first thing one would expect is to look at any allegations, and it's not rocket science where a Japanese or anyone is alleged to have drugged or abducted or raped or what have you. That's fairly standard police procedures. But bear in mind they had 80 to 100 detectives working on this, allegedly, so they did take a little while to get going.
But Japan's privacy laws are still proving a big obstacle to Tim's progress in his search for Lucie.
We had a serious problem. Lucie had made phone calls on a mobile phone. This should all have been possible to track.
Tim and Sophie make a direct plea to Derry Irvine, Britain's Lord Chancellor, who is visiting Japan, in the hope his legal expertise can help them.
He persuaded them that a police investigation was also confidential and private, and therefore to investigate mobile phones through a police investigation was not a contravention of people's privacy.
Now able to trace the location of Lucie's calls on the day of her disappearance, and with the information from the hotline, police have a name. 48-year-old Joji Obara. Investigating officers arrest him at his Tokyo home. With a prime suspect in custody and senior officers preparing to interrogate him, it's a major breakthrough in the case.
Lucie Blackman さんとはどうやって出会った？言いたくありません。
But to Professor of Law and retired prosecutor Dr. Takeshi Tsukimoto, Obara's denials could damage the case against him.
We have a conviction rate of over 99%, believe it or not. This is because in Japan, judges tend to decide one is guilty or not guilty by finding evidence which is based on a confession.
While interrogators push for the crucial confession, the remaining officers in the team begin searching Obara's properties for clues leading to the whereabouts of Lucie Blackman.
The police raided a number of his properties all over Japan, and they found vast amounts of material.
Amongst a small pharmacy of drugs, police identify several bottles of chloroform, which can be used to render people unconscious. Between 4,000 and 5,000 videotapes are also discovered and taken away by police to be scrutinized. Investigators then find a roll of undeveloped film. Once processed, it contains several pictures of Lucie Blackman in Obara's apartment and on the beach.
Okay.
Obara has no choice and admits to having met Lucie Blackman.
Lucie Blackman さんが失踪した時、それは一緒にいたのか？ええ、確かに一緒にいました。
He admitted that he'd met Lucie at the club, he'd invited her on a date. They went to his seaside house, he took a photograph of her by the sea.
逗子にあるマンションで一緒にお酒を飲みました。
He wasn't denying he'd been with her in that apartment, but he denied having anything to do with her disappearance.
その後また駅で別れました。それは何時に戻った？女はどこへ行った？
While Joji Obara remains tight-lipped, the police search into his background. Obara is a millionaire playboy businessman. As well as coming from a wealthy family who made their fortune from Japan's gambling parlors, he also amassed a personal fortune from property development. On the surface, he appears to be an eccentric tycoon with a fleet of luxury cars, but beyond that, little else is known.
Joji Obara's character and personality are, to a large extent, a mystery. There are very few, almost no, photographs of him after he left school, after he was a boy.
With Obara remaining stubborn and silent under questioning, investigators step up the search of his possessions for yet more evidence against him.
They found a lot of notebooks in which he'd recorded his encounters with women going back to his youth. There were some names in there. They couldn't always identify the people concerned, but in some cases they could.
In one disturbing diary entry, Obara has scrawled, "Too much chloroform." 21-year-old Lucie Blackman has disappeared whilst working as a hostess in Tokyo. Police have mounted one of the biggest criminal investigations in Japanese history. 4 months after Lucie went missing, they now have a prime suspect in custody, a wealthy playboy called Joji Obara. In the search for Lucie, police examine Obara's diaries, which contain hundreds of women's names. Next to one name is a disturbing entry scrawled, "Too much chloroform." Her name is Carita Ridgway. Police investigate further and make a shocking discovery.
Carita Ridgway was working as a hostess in Tokyo in 1992. One morning, her sister got a phone call to say that Carita was in the hospital. She rushed over there to discover that her sister was very ill.
A man calling himself Mr. Nishida brought her to the hospital.
何か心当たりはありますか？昨日の夜から、生牡蠣食べたんですよ。夕べ生牡蠣を召し上がりました。はい。
She'd been out on a date the night before with a customer, and he explained that Carita had apparently eaten a raw oyster, which had caused this devastating failure of her liver.
After 12 days in hospital, doctors decide there is nothing more they can do. On February the 29th, 1992, her family agree to have her life support machine turned off. Police at the time don't investigate the case. Then, 8 years later, in 2000, and 3 months after Lucie's disappearance, the Blackman case is front-page news in Australia.
Carita's former boyfriend and fiancé was in Australia and read about the Lucie Blackman case and the arrest of George Yobara in an Australian newspaper, and immediately wondered if there was a connection.
Despite Carita Ridgway being cremated in 1992, one piece of crucial evidence remains.
Remarkably, the hospital had preserved a sample of Carita's liver, so they were able to take that and to test it once again, and to find traces of chloroform, which had been used.
Detectives now had another element to their investigation of Joji Obara, and a potentially vital clue to what may have happened to Lucie Blackman. Police now turn to Obara's vast collection of videos for evidence and make a horrific discovery. In countless tapes, a masked Obara is seen administering chloroform and then raping unconscious victims. In Japan, raping unconscious women is known as jungokan. It is an act sought out by sexual fetishists. On one of Obara's tapes, the cause of Carita Ridgway's tragic death emerges.
The Japanese police eventually found the video of George Obara raping Carita Ridgway, and were able to show that her cause of death was not a bad oyster. It was the drugs which Obara had given to Carita to send her unconscious so that he could rape her.
Police know they are dealing with a suspected serial rapist and murderer. They charge Obara with the rape and killing of Carita Ridgway and the rape of a further 8 women. The news reaches the Blackman family.
I was reading this stuff just as much as anybody else was and thinking, wow, this bloke's really weird. But I hadn't thought that he was Lucie's killer. Only because I was probably blanking that out.
Tim is back in the UK, having decided to fly back from Tokyo in September 2000. As well as receiving donations from well-wishers, he has spent tens of thousands of pounds searching for his daughter. He is depressed and drained. Further evidence suggesting that Lucie may have never left Obara's apartment paints a bleak picture.
They found on the hard drive of his computer internet searches he'd done for things like sulfuric acid, information on how to get rid of a dead body.
Investigators retrace Obara's movements around the time Lucie disappeared.
もしもし。連れの女性が薬物中毒になったんですが、どうしたらいいか教えてください。
Phone traces from Obara's home reveal that on July the 2nd, he made several calls to local hospitals, asking them for advice on how to deal with a victim of drug overdose.
ちょっとやってみます。はい。
On July the 3rd, the caretaker of his block called the police to complain about strange noises coming from Obara's apartment.
He got into a bit of an argument with the caretaker of the apartment block, and 2 local policemen came round and knocked on the door.
ちょっと話を。帰ってくださいよ。
He was described as sweating, looking agitated. He didn't want to let the police in.
7月6日、部屋の中にいなかったらなぜだ。ちょうど トイレのタイルの張り替えをやってて、それにシャワーを浴びてばっかりだったんで。
And he aggressively told them to go away.
もういいでしょ。帰ってくれ。
Despite Ibarra's odd behavior at the time, the officers were powerless to take any immediate action.
脅迫不正の侵害、ともかく緊急要請。
Only in cases of imminent and unlawful infringement can the police rush into the room. For example, if there was a woman screaming in the room, she is shouting for help. They must have made the judgment at the time that there was no need for it, or the policeman must have been totally tricked by Mr. Obara.
ママと騙された。
It is now over 7 months since Lucie's disappearance. Obara has been in police custody for 18 weeks. Police broaden their investigations to the area around Obara's seaside apartment. They walk past the tree line and over the rocks to a cave overlooking the bay. In the mouth of the cave, they find an upturned bath.
I was sitting at home watching the news on the television, and here were all the blue sheets, and they were recovering something from the beach.
From under the bath, they recover several bags containing body parts and a block of cement.
I suspect everybody knew this was Lucie's body, but I didn't believe it to be Lucie's body.
When post-mortem examiners cut into the cement, they find a human skull. Using dental records, the remains are confirmed as those of Lucie Blackman.
And that, I think, is probably the first and only time that I actually believed that it was Lucie. And that was in the final moments of her pieces being found.
The long search for Lucie Blackman has come to a harrowing end. The journey to bring her killer to justice is about to begin. But Joji Obara is denying all the charges against him.
じゃあ、これはどうだ。部屋かどこかでルーシーさんをバラバラにして洞窟に埋めたんじゃないか。それは黙秘します。
With no confession, the job now falls to the forensics team to begin gathering clues from Lucie's remains. One piece of evidence becomes clear: the tool used to dismember Lucie's body. Forensic pathologist Dr. Masahiko Ueno explains.
The cross-sections of the cat's jacket, packed tight with small jacket cuts. When a handsaw is used, the space between each jacket cut is wide, because the sewing movement is long. When a chainsaw is used, however, the movement involves lots of vibrations, so the cut surface becomes very jagged.
Receipts found by police confirm Obara purchased a chainsaw only days after Lucie disappeared. But beyond this, there were no significant forensic clues.
They couldn't say what had caused Lucie's death. They couldn't say exactly when she died or where she died. There was no smoking gun. There was no DNA evidence, for example, hair or semen from Obara on Lucie's remains. And the reason for this was really that her body, which had been cut into pieces, had been in the ground for 7 months in this wet, sandy ground. And it simply wasn't in a condition where you could take clear samples and determine what had killed her.
It's a major setback for the investigation. Immediately, questions are asked as to why the police didn't find the body earlier.
Some people have suggested that the police knew where her body was from quite early on, because they searched the area with dogs. Why didn't they find a dead body? So it could be that they did know, and they left the body there because they wanted Joji Obara to lead them to it. They wanted him to confess. If they did that, they miscalculated badly.
The prosecution case will have to be constructed from the overwhelming circumstantial evidence they have amassed against Obara.
According to the prosecution, 10 or 15 years, he was a serial abductor and rapist of women whom he drugged and raped while unconscious. They would get to this apartment which he kept in the town of Lucie.
Okay, please.
and they would come in and he might order food, and he'd offer them a drink.
Would you like drink?
Yeah, okay.
He would urge girls to try a rare wine, which he would tell them came from India or the Philippines, to account for the funny taste of this drug-laced beverage.
It's considered good drug to drink in one.
In one?
If not, bad drug. Hey, goodbye.
Kanpai.
The prosecution alleged that this was how Ibarra rendered Lucie unconscious on the night of the 2nd of July, 2001.
Lucie. Hey.
Joji Ibarra is charged with the abduction, the rape resulting in death, and the disposal of Lucie Blackman's body. He will also face 8 other charges of rape and the murder of Carita Ridgway. On the 3rd of July 2001, at a court hearing, Ibarra pleads not guilty to all of the charges. His trial is set for November 2003. Tim and his family will finally have their day in court. But during the trial, Tim Blackman becomes embroiled in a controversy that turns public opinion against him and divides his family. The dismembered body of 21-year-old Lucie Blackman has been found in a cave by the Pacific coast, an hour's drive from Tokyo. Joji Ibarra, a reclusive millionaire playboy, is charged with her abduction, rape, and killing. He also stands accused of the murder of Australian hostess Carita Ridgway, as well as facing 8 separate charges of rape. His trial begins in November 2003 under intense media coverage. For Lucie Blackman's family, it's a bewildering experience.
I'd been asked many times what did I think it was going to be like, and it was such a surreal experience that it really felt almost like we were the extras in a TV drama. Did I feel angry? No, I didn't feel angry. Did I want to leap over there and stab him? No, I didn't want to leap over there and stab him. It's a most strange feeling.
As the trial begins, Ibarra's defense lawyer, Yasuo Shianoya, immediately attacks the raft of circumstantial evidence.
This case is very difficult. There are huge differences between the prosecutors and the defense counsel. For example, we don't know the cause of Lucie Blackman's death. In short, there are many things we don't know, and many areas in which we cannot get the facts straight.
The defense was saying, you can't prove this. There is no proof that our client, as you say, raped, killed, and cut up this woman. All there was circumstantial evidence. And the defense lawyers did their best to suggest alternative explanations for all these small items of circumstantial evidence.
For the Blackmans, the trial is made all the more painful as the judges hear evidence for one short session every month. Progress is agonizingly slow.
We'd been warned many times that this trial was going to be protracted and that it was going to go on for a long period of time. I hadn't really quite imagined that that would be such a long period of time.
On the 30th of September 2006, 3 years into the trial, events take a bizarre turn when Joji Ibarra makes an offer to Lucie Blackman's parents.
Well, I was told quite early on to expect some sort of offer of reparation from the defendant, and I sort of said, well, that sounds a bit odd.
The defense, on behalf of Ibarra, offered Tim and his ex-wife Jane Steer over £450,000 each.
What sometimes happens in Japanese criminal cases is that a defendant who's pleading guilty will pay some money to the victim as a token of apology and to make things better.
The reason why he paid the money was due to moral obligation. His position is that he's not responsible in terms of law. For example, in Lucie Blackman's case, he says he has a moral obligation in that an invitation to his room resulted in her tragic death.
Tim accepts the offer, but Lucie's mother, Jane Steer, rejects hers and publicly criticizes her former husband's decision.
Jane would say that the prosecutors have said, do not accept any money at this stage. But he took it.
When he accepted that money, what did you think? I just couldn't understand morally how a father could take money before the end of a trial from somebody like Joji Obara. Morally, I think it's not right.
I considered that given the trauma and everything that the family had been through, that I'd accept the payment, and that's what we did.
On the 24th of April 2007, after a trial spanning 4 years, the panel of 3 judges finally reached their verdict. Tim and Sophie Blackman are at the back of the court when the verdicts are read out.
There's a huge roar of chairs being pushed back on the floor as journalists rush to go out of the door. We don't know what's going on.
55-year-old Joji Obara is found guilty on all 8 counts of rape and the rape and killing of Karita Ridgway. But on the charges relating to Lucie Blackman, he is acquitted.
We feel that, in many respects, Lucie has been robbed of her justice.
Lucie's family are very disappointed today, I think so. But I ask Lucie's family to understand this judge's decision.
Initially, Sophie and I were really upset and dumbfounded that they could take all this evidence that was there and come up with this conclusion.
But the verdicts relating to Lucie Blackman are immediately appealed by the prosecution. On the 16th of December 2008, the appeal verdict is announced. Joji Obara is found guilty of abducting Lucie Blackman and dismembering and concealing her body.
This has been a harrowing ordeal, not just for today, but for over 8 years. But at last we have 2 guilty verdicts and a life sentence for the crimes Obara committed against my wonderful Lucie.
Joji Obara will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But for Lucie's family, the sentence will never heal the profound emotional wounds they have suffered.
The firstborn child is always very, very special, I think. I was a young man of 26 when she was born. There's a picture of her and me walking along a lane, and she's probably about 18 months old. Her little blonde head is right down here. And all I see is this tragic path.